I am a survivor of domestic violence. My story began in 2002 when I married for the second time. My husband and I had children from our first marriages, but never had children together. We had dated for 3 years prior to the marriage. My husband appeared to be a very kind, caring, and well-respected man within the community. He worked for the police department and ATF. He was an investigator for the Bomb and Arson Unit Canine Division. Following the wedding, he moved into my home and began almost immediately showing signs of controlling and obsessive behavior. I was unable to do anything without his knowledge and approval. He called repeatedly and would go through the trash, my phone records in my car. He took my phone away on numerous occasions. For me, it was emotional abuse, mind games, and threats. He never physically abused me. I had no scars, no bruises, no broken bones. I found out that my husband was not the person he claimed to be. Everything he had told me had been a lie. In November of 2005, he became angry and threatened me with a gun. I left and temporarily moved into my daughter's home and filed for divorce. He began stalking me and hired others to follow me. I filed for an order of protection. 4 days after filing, he became a danger to my children, and they became the targets of his vicious attacks. At approximately 3 a.m. in the morning, my daughter's car caught fire in front of her apartment. It was a total loss. This occurred in my husband's district, an area of expertise. His department was informed of our concerns. Later that morning, my husband showed up at my work and dropped off an envelope that read, "Rethink this." I called the police to make a report. It had been 6 days since filing for the order of protection, but my husband had not yet been served. The police officer made contact with him and proceeded to serve him. Exactly 2 weeks later, again at approximately 3 a.m., my son's car exploded and burned in his driveway along with my daughter's second car, which was also in the driveway at the time. My son was inside the house asleep and did not hear the explosion. The fire was so hot that it moved to the house, and if not for the quick response of a neighbor and the local fire department, this could have easily become a fatal consequence. Once again, this occurred in my husband's district, an area of expertise. His department was again contacted with our concerns. Later that morning, I contacted Internal Affairs. His department was again contacted with our concerns. His department sent out an independent investigator to review the 2 fires. Both were undetermined, probably electrical, with nothing more they could do. By the way, my husband was also an electrician. Over the next 3 weeks, my husband continuously drove through the parking lot where I worked. I contacted Internal Affairs 2 more times. I made at least 6 reports of violation of the ex parte. He denied all of them. I was unable to get the full order of protection because every time a hearing was scheduled, he managed to have it continued. He knew the system better than most, so getting the full order of protection actually took over 1 year to accomplish. My husband used the divorce proceedings to pull all my information. One evening after work, I walked to my car in the parking lot when I saw my husband sitting in his car watching me. I jumped into my car and drove directly to the nearest police station. When contacted by the police, he denied being there again. 1 hour later, I received a disturbing message on my voicemail. I took my phone to the police and filed another report. I then contacted his son to inform him of his father's increasingly strange behavior. His son called me later that evening, explaining that his dad's intentions that night were to kill me and then himself. He had meticulously laid out instructions for his son as well as clothing for the funeral. He was admitted that night to a hospital psychiatric unit. He was evaluated for 1 week, given medication, and released. 2 days later, letters arrived at several of my family's homes. My husband had mailed them prior to coming after me. They explained why he had to kill me and blamed them for everything. Throughout the next couple of months, things were fairly quiet. We were in the process of planning my youngest daughter's wedding and looking forward to the birth of my oldest daughter's 3rd child, due around the same time. The fun was overshadowed by occasional unexplained hang-up phone calls that would come in through the middle of the night. My husband continued to drive through the parking lot where I worked day after day. Reports were made. He took things out of my car. When confronted, he denied being there. I was becoming more and more desperate. He knew just what to do. I was told by police that their hands were tied unless we could show some kind of proof. I was finally able to get that proof. Friends of mine actually came to my office and sat at the window all day, waiting just to get him on videotape, and they did. Another report was made, and once again he lied about his whereabouts, but this time I had proof. 2 days later, my youngest daughter woke up to a threatening note that had been left through the night on the windshield of her car. I think you can imagine, with her upcoming wedding only weeks away, the fear she experienced as she read the note. I did not get my invitation, it read, but I'll be there. It'll be a blast. Again, a police report was made. 3 days later, he was arrested on charges of stalking with a bond set at $1,000, a misdemeanor. He was out on bail within hours and more volatile than ever. One evening around midnight, a pipe bomb exploded on the back deck of my oldest daughter's home, setting the back of their house on fire. My infant grandchildren, ages 2 and 14 months, were asleep only a few feet away. During the investigation and approximately 12 hours later, I received a call that my home was now on fire. The losses were now reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars and putting a huge financial burden on me and my family. My husband was brought in for questioning. When he arrived, he had a gun in his car. Due to the fact that I was still waiting to get the full order of protection, no violation had been made. He was, however, taken in for the second time to the psychiatric unit for evaluation. He was held 3 days, given a new prescription of medication, and once again released. Both fires were determined arson, but I am told that there is no way they can prove this to be the work of my husband. The fact that he drives around with accelerants in his car is just part of his job, and proving anything would be difficult. I'm told a picture of him in the act would help. 3 car fires, 2 house fires, a threatening note, a written letter of his attempt to kill me and himself, and there is nothing we can do. Multiple districts were becoming involved. We feared what was yet to come. The stress my daughter was put under also put her unborn baby at risk, and arrangements had to be made to take the child early. With protection prearranged at the hospital and the other children being separated and placed in undisclosed locations until the baby could be delivered, we managed to get this accomplished. The pain was excruciating as I watched my children being separated from their children in order to keep them safe at this time. The next day after the birth of my newest grandchild, and just 1.5 weeks prior to my youngest daughter's wedding, my husband was once again arrested, this time for aggravated stalking. A $10,000 bond was set. He posted bail on his credit card and again was out within hours. We now had to take careful consideration into events leading up to the wedding. The bridal shower was canceled. People were scared. Due to the extreme measures of precaution taken by the St. Charles and St. Peter's police departments, we were able to keep the rehearsal and wedding on as scheduled. To them, we are extremely grateful. One day prior to my daughter's wedding, my husband was arrested for the 3rd time, this time on charges of theft, a felony. During the investigation of the fire at my home, investigators uncovered some of the things I previously reported stolen out of my car. This time, a $200,000 cash-only bond was set. My husband was unable to post bond this time. Something had finally been done to give us peace, if only temporary, but the thought still lingered as how much time we had until he would be back on the street again. The courts understood the dangers, but domestic violence laws were sadly outdated and protection was minimal. He was held for 1 year. During this time, our divorce became settled. It was then, in 2007, that I was first introduced to the Safe at Home program. It was in its earliest phase of operation. The people at the Safe at Home program understood the serious nature of the threats that my family and I had been under and facilitated the review process. I decided that it was necessary to leave my job that I had held for over 20 years in order to protect the other employees. I relocated, changed my name, and got a different car. The Safe at Home program were instrumental in keeping my address and legal information confidential. My ex-husband continued to try and get his bond reduced. My family and I put ourselves at great risk at each and every hearing we pleaded with the judges. He was released without a trial, but a strict probation was set. But the terrifying letters of revenge and the heartless attacks on my family remain fresh on my mind. After being released, my ex-husband did not move on with his life. His behavior over the next year included countless attempts to take our previously settled divorce back to court, as well as hearings to have his probation changed. He even used ridiculous hearings to have me served in an attempt to locate me through a summons. If it had not been for all the help that the Safe at Home program provided at that time, I am sure that I would not be here today. They intervened the process server and accepted a summons on my behalf, managing to keep my personal information confidential. Within weeks of these attempts, my ex-husband returned to my brother's home, which was the last place he knew I had been living. My brother was standing in the kitchen that night when he was shot at multiple times through the windows. I thank God every day that my brother survived and was only injured from the broken glass. My brother managed to get the license plate. I pleaded with the police that this was not an isolated incident. I pleaded that they do not put this aside because someone else could be next. Their investigation found a link between the car and my ex-husband. We were now looking at possible assault charges, although to me it sounded like attempted murder. The police once again had a warrant for my ex-husband's arrest. However, this time he never made it back to jail. Instead, he committed suicide. I was numb for days. Then emotions slowly began to surface. Could this nightmare finally be over? For the first time in 5 years, I felt relief. Thank God my family is safe is all I could think. It had been 5 very long years of living in constant fear. It had consumed my life so long that I was unsure what it would be like to live life normally again. Believe it or not, this is merely a small portion of my story. However, during the past 5 years, my ex-husband's behavior resulted in multiple reports that involve various departments. I am and will always be grateful to the St. Charles Police Department and to the St. Charles Prosecuting Attorney's Office for their expertise, hard work, determination, and support in this matter. They truly stood out above the rest for their knowledge in the area of stalking. They understood the serious dangers associated with these individuals and took every precaution as they worked diligently to try and seek justice in a limited court system. I have come to realize that not all law enforcement have been as educated in this area and do not fully understand the potential dangers involved when handling these particular behaviors. I have experienced firsthand the need for better laws with stronger consequences to protect those being victimized in the future. I feel that orders of protection especially need serious review. Each time my husband was arrested and released, the violence only got worse. Allowing him to repeatedly bond out did not stop his behavior. It only enabled him to continue down a much more destructive path. These individuals are incapable of changing their own lives. They do not value their own lives, therefore expecting them to comply with rules and to suddenly value someone else's life is incomprehensible and ignores the possibility of a potentially fatal outcome. I am here today only because my ex-husband decided to take his life rather than go back to jail. I am here only because the Safe at Home program protected me when holes in the system could not. There are thousands of women and children who are currently living outside their homes, schools, and jobs in order to hide from the vicious attacks of their perpetrators. They cannot speak publicly out of fear of what might happen to them, or worse, what might happen to their children. My experience made me fully understand why individuals stay in abusive relationships. The fear of your children and family being murdered is far greater abuse than being physically injured yourself. I commend the Attorney General and everyone involved with the Domestic Violence Task Force for giving of their time to educate themselves, evaluate, and bring attention to this serious matter. It would be completely irresponsible of us to ignore the knowledge we have today. Taking necessary actions to be proactive is essential in protecting our children's future against these violent acts. We need to send the message that this behavior will not be tolerated. Allowing second, third, and fourth chances can and does result in murder. Many victims have not made it. They and their children have senselessly been murdered. Please do not let the murder of these innocent individuals and children be forgotten. We owe it to them. They were cheated out of their futures. Their families live and mourn their loss each and every day. I feel strongly that we must be the voices of these individuals and thousands of others who out of fear cannot speak for themselves. I hope that my experiences have projected a better understanding of emotional abuse and domestic violence and the serious problems within our legal system. As a voter and citizen of the state of Missouri, I, along with thousands of others, will be paying close attention to your decisions on this topic. I believe that our Missouri lawmakers and political leaders can put their differences aside and join forces on such a serious violation of its citizens. No one deserves to live under this kind of terror. Children, especially, do not deserve to live like this. They deserve to go back to their homes, their friends, their schools, and their jobs. They deserve to be able to lay down in their own beds at night, feeling safe and protected. They do not deserve to be victimized and feel threatened, as my children and grandchildren did in their very own homes. Thank you very much.